Oh, wow. The numbers are jumping really fast.
Hi, everyone. We're just giving it a minute or two for the rest of the registrants to pop in, and we'll get started in about 30 seconds or so.
From Capital IQ.
Oh, nice.
It's really, I find it very informative.
Marcia, why don't we go ahead and get started, and people will join as they join.
Okay, sounds great. So, and am I kicking this off or you? Sorry.
Well, why don't you kick us off, and then I'll go over the housekeeping rules.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the Canadian webinar series. This is U.S. Tariff Webinar Part 3. And our topic for this afternoon is what plans are FM's making to ease and combat the U.S. tariffs. So my name is Marcia O'Connor, and I'm the chair of membership and education for the Toronto South Central IFMA chapter. And we have a great lineup of panels, experts this afternoon to share with you their experiences in dealing with the tariffs. I'm just going to ask each of them to introduce themselves. Let's start with Mark.
Thanks to you, Marcia. I appreciate it. Mark Couture, I'm the Vice President of Clean Infrastructure Solutions at Blackstone Energy Services. And in my role, Blackstone, we are designing deep energy retrofits designed to decarbonize and save energy for our clients. And we also take on the role as the operator and providing all the maintenance for the full life cycle of the assets. So definitely have a vested interest in both the capital costs as well as operational costs.
Fabulous, fabulous. Okay, let's jump over to Maggie. Yes, Maggie.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Yeah,
No problem. Maggie. Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie Davey. I am the Senior Facility Manager with JLL, and I work on the Canada Post account. So I oversee, I think, 39 buildings around the Kitchener, Cambridge portfolio. So, managing the facility, ensuring everything is kept up to speed. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, Maggie. Jason.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jason Smith, Director of Facilities and Capital Projects for Norfolk General Hospital, West Haldimand General Hospital, Norfolk Hospital Nursing Home, and Holmes House. As you can tell by my title, I take care of all the buildings and facilities and capital planning and projects that occur at those hospitals and nursing home. And very much looking forward to this discussion today.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, Jason.
I'll jump in here for just a moment, Marcia. Thank you, everybody, for the introductions. A couple of housekeeping rules. Just wanted to let everyone know what to expect today. We're going to open up with a very interesting overview from Marcia herself. We will follow up with a panel discussion, including some questions to the audience. However, I do ask if you have any questions or comments, you can either post them into our chat right away so you don't forget about them, or feel free to hold them until the end because we do have some time put aside for the Q&A. Please also maintain your mics on mute throughout the duration of this webinar to ensure an enjoyable experience for all the folks on this call. Thank you, Marcia, back to you.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, let's get into the presentation deck. So I put this together, I'll say in the last 24 hours. And the reason for that is what I heard on the news, and many of you probably heard on the news, is on again, off again, on again, off again, and trying to get a handle with regards to what's happening related to tariffs, related to our industry, is a real challenge to get the right information. So really the big question, that I'm hoping that our panel will be able to enlighten everyone in the room today, it is what is the latest news and how is it impacting on their businesses, and how is it impacting on the FM operations, and how is it impacting Canada? All right, and these are big questions, and through these webinars, I'm hoping we get a little bit more intel with regards to how to manage and combat the U.S. tariffs. Okay, Anna. So, with so much information out there on the tariffs, I wanted to go back to simple basic 101 with everyone today and really define what is a tariff. And what we're talking about is imposed taxes on goods and services imported by other countries. And then what we're talking about, the purpose of it is making foreign goods more expensive and generates revenue for the government that has imposed the tariff. Okay. Now, again, realistically, when you hear about all the news and the changes and hourly changes that are happening in the news, no one helps us understand what it is. And that's what I'm hoping to try to help everybody in the room today. All right, let's keep going. So I look at it this way. I look at a kind of a chart here of timelines here where President Donald Trump introduced tariffs. And what he said is that I'm going to impose a 25% tariff on imported goods from Canada, which it turns out to approximately, and then he also talked about the 10% increase in energy costs as well, right? And then there was a retaliation by the past Prime Minister Trudeau from Canada's perspective. If everybody recall or remember, there was some mention of retaliation. But I don't know if everyone was aware, but his retaliation amounted to $155 billion. And you aware of that? Like, it was mind-boggling when I found this information, and I wanted to share that with everyone today. The other thing that was mind-boggling was the number of elements that are impacted by the $155 billion. It wasn't just Canada, it was also impacting the US, that with these retaliation reciprocal tariffs that Canada was imposing. So with the impact of these tariffs, there's really, in our industry, this mixed reaction with regards to what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So what's the impact today? There are delays that are happening. There are some price cost increases in goods and services and gas and groceries in both countries, and not just Canada, but in the US too. So both sides are a little bit in turmoil with regards to what does these tariffs mean? Is there any benefit of the tariffs, and how are we going to manage it? All right, keep going, Anna, thank you. So let's look at the broader sense with regards to the tariffs. Tariffs are going to disrupt supply chain and slow urban development because some of these supplies are going to take longer to take, or the purchase of it, many companies are going to look at rerouting other ways of getting these supplies and services, right? So what's happening in the construction field, in our field, in dealing with the FM field, the cost pressures and planning is uncertain today until there's some resolution. But we still need to get some answers. We need to have a plan, regardless of the fact that we don't have answers. And that's where Maggie comes in, and Mark, and this is where Jason comes in today too. So what's happened is facilities may delay upgrades or shift costlier local alternatives, which means, well, if we were previously purchasing these goods from the US, does it make sense to bypass USA and get the equipment and purchase it through Mexico, for example? Or is it more advantageous to go through Europe, for example? these are things that we are all contemplating right now to be able to continuation of our services. So if you thought about it, what is the specific impact on FM? We're talking about renovations and maintenance costs may climb due to expensive materials. So there's indication right now, because of what the tariffs are supposedly implying on our industry, that it could be at a potential increase of 48%. So then the big question I ask all of you is, so what are you doing about it? Okay, so big question mark. The second one is imported equipment affected, like the HVAC systems or fire equipment. So the anticipation on us is that it's going to create a greater delay. So what's our planning cycle? Are we being proactive? Are we planning? And then the last area is dealing with the energy efficiency and dealing with LED lighting, heat pumps, and that will also be impacted by the tariffs. And potentially, they said a 10% tariff on energy products. Okay, and that's where Mark comes in, right? So kind of think about what are the long-term implications of the tariff. Well, it's going to cause some delays, we think, right now. It's going to slow down production. It's going to slow down timelines. It's going to slow down finding service providers, because I know many of my friends and contacts are looking at alternative suppliers and contractors, because right now the current ones are saying, we don't know what we're doing. So we can't sit still, because our job is making sure that our buildings are sound, good condition, and functional, right? So now we need to look at, last factor here, zero cost increases in energy and product manufactured in the US. Are we willing to kind of swallow, our pride and say, well, we need the product, so we're going to pay the additional costs? Okay, Anna. One more, Anna. So I'm going to end it by saying, we want to share. You need to share. We all need to share best practices and insights and how best to combat the US tariffs. So on that note, I'm going to ask Anna to bring down the slide deck, and then we'll go over to the panel. Oh, sorry. I have a poll for everybody before we go to the panel. Are you ready? So I would ask all the participants to respond, and it's unanimous, by the way, so we're all good. So if you can respond to this poll, will be great. And then submit your answer. Interesting results, Maggie and Jason and Mark. There's 21% of the room that says they're ready, and then there's 57% of the room that says so-so, and then waiting for more concrete decisions. Interesting. Thank you so much for participating. All right, let's open it up to the panel. So I'm going to ask each panel member one specific question to start, and all three of them are going to answer the same question. So let's look at the question I'm going to ask here. So the question here is, how have tariffs impacted your current operations? So Jason, why don't you start?
Sure. It's interesting, and I will attempt to be brief, Marcia, so please help me in that if necessary. I look at the current tariffs similar to, and I apologize to everyone because I'm sure people will make a grimace, COVID, because we saw very much the same sort of emerging unpredictability, escalating prices, uncertainty about those prices, strange supply chain impacts, and I would say the opportunity for blame as the reason why prices were escalating. And so in essence, I guess that's sort of the approach I'm taking as far as what I'm expecting. So as far as kind of what I'm doing, really it's looking at stockpiling necessary equipment. And again, I'm speaking from a healthcare perspective, working at hospitals. So we need to make sure that we have our masks, as an example. We need a supply of masks, reliably so. Reviewing contracts to make sure that the contracts are in compliance with the new policy directives that have come from the government. And also looking, of course, for local alternatives. Thanks,
Thank
Marcia.
you for that. Really great insight. I shiver when I think about post-COVID, right? Because all of us went through a lot of ups and downs, and going through another one, it's kind of thinking about what are the implications again, right? So thank you, Jason, for that insight. Maggie, why don't you go next?
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned COVID, because everyone I talk to about it, always goes back to COVID, and it's like, ugh. But I think in my industry with Canada Post, it's with the facility management world, you're always trying to be proactive and get on top of stuff prior to the client. So that's tough right now because like Marshall said, every day is changing, and you look at the news, it's different each day. So how do you be proactive? So I think kind of planning different scenarios is kind of our approach when we're looking at big projects and replacements. HVAC is really important to us, and docks and doors and that type of stuff. It can't stop because the mail can't stop. So being proactive and really leveraging our vendors and suppliers, our sourcing team. So kind of that way is just kind of trying to be as proactive as we can in building those strong relationships with our vendors.
Thank you for that insight, Maggie. Let's jump over to Mark.
So how have tariffs impacted our business at Blackstone? I think that we've got a very two different, very different perspectives on the tariffs, the way they've impacted us. Number one, I think, would be on the side where we're performing retrofits for our clients, and we're ordering things like boilers and chillers and cooling towers and other equipment, major equipment, a lot of which are being sourced from the US or overseas. So really trying to firstly untangle this whole web and understand what will be potentially exposed to tariffs, what won't be exposed to tariffs. And then if we think that there's certain pieces of equipment that are being delivered that might attract these tariffs, we're immediately reaching out to the manufacturers and trying to really see if perhaps if equipment is actually being made in the US, if it's being made in China or India or anywhere else, and trying to see if there's any changes that can be made to that supply chain to bring things in directly from a true country of origin and be brought to Canada without maybe stopping in the US. A good example of this would be some York chillers, where they're manufactured in China or India, but then they go to the US, they get improved, and there's a little bit of additional work done in the US, and it comes to Canada after that. So seeing if we could possibly, bypass that pit stop in the US for the last 5% of assembly or something, or receive it unassembled and do it assembled on site to mitigate that risk of tariffs being applied to the equipment, because getting 20 or 25% on this equipment really does blow our budgets. You're talking equipment that could be $800,000, $1 million, and in aggregate, we probably have about $30 or $40 million of orders that are out there that are being exposed to potentially, $10 million of uncontemplated costs. For us, it blows up the business case. So, we're dealing with the suppliers, but also looking actively for alternative manufacturers and trying to sort of weigh the pros and cons and even negotiate with alternative manufacturers to see if we can hold our budget price. What we have found is that with the existing manufacturer that we had maybe contemplated procuring the equipment through, or even through the alternative manufacturers, we've had really good success in trying to negotiate for them to hold pricing or to take on a good portion of the tariff risk, or even to find ways of mitigating or substantially mitigating a lot of the tariff risk. So I'd say we've done a really good job there with our procurement team. The flip side is that I'm sure we all understand how tariffs work, but they're meant to incentivize local manufacturing. And in our case, we are also a manufacturer of an energy management information system or distributed energy resource management system. And our competitors are overseas or in the US. So for Jason, you probably are going through this where you have a decree saying, buy Ontario first or buy Canada first. And if you want to buy outside of Ontario or Canada, you need like a really high level executive permission to do so. So we've seen a big shift in our business for our own Blackstone products, where now we've become very, very competitive, or the preferred vendor compared to a lot of our international competitors. And that's been a big shift for some of our business, where, before we might have been having a little bit of difficulty getting traction with certain customers, and now they're calling us and saying, you guys perform the same or have the same competitive solution as XYZ company in Germany or in the US or in China, and we really want to explore your product more now to see if this can help us buy local. So we've been facing both ends of this, and I think that there's
great insight, Mark, as a vendor and supplier, and also an energy perspective as well. So
absolutely.
Thank you very, very much for that. So I'm going to ask Anna to throw up another poll.
Sure thing. Coming right up.
Curious, with regards to the participants in the room this afternoon, how many are looking at purchasing Canadian-made goods and services? So if you can respond to the poll, that would be much appreciated. Wow. That's a significant number. Interesting. So thank you for sharing, like 90% yes and to 0 for no. And then some are saying not yet, which is like a very low number of 10%. Very interesting stats. So thank you again for participating. All right, I'm going to go and ask some questions of our panel. And then we done randomly, Jason. So I go ask you first every time. Okay. So, but I am going to ask you again. I'm going to start with Maggie, actually. My first question for the afternoon. Maggie, what adjustments have you made at Canada Post or JLL made to your procurement strategies to mitigate tariff-related cost increases?
Thank you. Yeah, I think with Canada Post, with my role, I focus a lot on preventative maintenance and repairs, and that type of stuff hasn't affected us quite yet. Fingers crossed when it comes to the labor and stuff like that. But I think the main source is going to be those deficiencies that do come up after the PM. And the tough thing with our client is we do have preferred vendors that we've just gone through contract changes with that we need to use. So I think with us, we're really trying to leverage the relationships we have with our current vendors and their suppliers, and opening that conversation with them, ensuring that they know that this is super important to us, and we are thinking about it. We also work really largely with Acklands Granger or places like that do have large facilities within Canada, and working with them because we do have that relationship to see, can you store these items that we use on a regular basis in your facilities in Canada, so it's we don't have to have those extra costs, and it won't increase that budget that we, you know, have already created. So I think that's the main thing, is really leveraging our relationships with our vendors, and then working with those kind of storefronts that do have larger facilities within Canada, to see if they can, you know, supply and stock those items that we use on a regular basis.
That's great. Really being proactive there, Maggie. So kudos to Canada Post. All right,
Thank you.
Jason, what adjustments have you made in your procurement strategies to mitigate the tariffs?
So, couple pieces. One, I'll just kind of respond to Mark's point about the requirements in relation to purchasing Canadian. So, as a hospital, we were provided the opportunity to follow the government directive, which says that we can only buy US in the event that we cannot get it anywhere else from anyone else. And if so, we can submit a form to be reviewed by the government to gain approval for that contract. And so outside of that, we have to purchase outside of the US. And the way that they've defined Canadian is employing at least 250 people within Canada. And so there are companies that, you know, may be owned in the US, or at least the headquarters are based in the US, because again, ownership is diverse for the most part nowadays. However, if they employ at minimum 250 Canadians, then we can purchase from them. And so that is just an example of one of the complexities, because again, if you think about, you know, from our perspective, HVAC systems, things like that, it tends to be relatively cut and dry. As you extend it beyond our scope of work and start looking at things like pharmaceuticals, it tends to get very confusing and complex. But fortunately, we don't have to deal with that here today. So the other, sorry, I'm just admitting someone. The other piece, you know, that we're really looking at is GPOs. So group purchasing organizations. So we're a number of small hospitals, small nursing home, you know, very limited resources. And so we very much rely on the larger group purchasing organizations to help us with our contracts, to help us with our pricing, to help us navigate many of these challenges. And so in addition to reviewing our own internal contracts, we're working very closely with these GPOs to manage our way through the new directives, as well as, you know, basically steering things towards Canadian.
Wow. Wow. The government directive is amazing. Oh my gosh. You almost have to count bodies and make sure there's 250 people there, Jason.
Well, I'm pretty sure that you can imagine it would get a little ridiculous having me, you know, running from one meeting to go back to drive to Waterdown to inspect a plant to verify that they have 250 employees in Canada for the company that's providing us beds. So that's, like I said, that's why we rely so heavily on these GPOs that were set up under the government, the broader public sector procurement policies.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. Mark, I'm just seeing if you have anything in addition to add from your introduction there about, you know, what kind of adjustments you've made to your procurement strategies and acquiring the equipment.
Yeah, on top of what I had mentioned before, I think we're just very diligent in going back and re-estimating our projects. If we do have to face a change and we need to communicate this to our clients, we want to be able to do this as quickly as possible and be able to collaborate with them and make any changes necessary. So, and in addition to what Jason was mentioning, both from them as a manufacturer of a product, but also as a service provider being based in Canada and in Ontario, we have seen that as well from the services where procurement has shifted in our favor. So definitely there's two sides to this coin, being located in Canada. The difficulty is procuring from overseas in the US, obviously, but it is driving greater demand for our services and products locally. So that's nice.
Yes, good. Yeah, for you, for sure. and I think for Canadians and for many of the participants in the room today as well. So my next question is, have you explored alternative sourcing or domestic suppliers to reduce reliance on the tariffs? Jason, would you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So many of our suppliers are local. There's always an intent to try and support local businesses. Now, where they're getting all of their materials from and that whole supply chain piece is where it starts getting kind of challenging for us. And so again, looking towards the GPOs to help us with defining how we can make it more locally oriented. Again, I remember, and for Maggie's benefit, I'll speak again about COVID. I remember during COVID, the fragility of the supply chain was so strongly emphasized, and all of the politicians at the time were talking about the need to, determine a better way to do business in the future. And so, this I see to some extent, while it's difficult at the moment, it may bring out some benefits to us in the long run, because again, having local suppliers, having Canadian companies, like Mark that we can go to, it's bringing it back to, that local area, that manageability, not having to deal with someone who's 12 time zones away, throughout. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Mark, the question is, have you looked at other alternative sourcing for your supplies to reduce the potential impact of the tariffs?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got our technical engineers really trying to uncover every stone to make sure that we're looking at alternatives, maybe even going back to alternatives we had looked at initially that might have been a little bit higher priced or longer lead time, and going back and renegotiating with them to see if things have changed, to see if we can get equipment faster or if we can negotiate a better price. Certainly, similar to Jason and the government's directive, we're looking for Ontario-made goods. So we've been looking at alternative manufacturers of chillers and boilers that are Ontario-made as sort of a first priority too. So I think we've had really good success in trying to make our supply chain more robust and not relying on sort of the traditional routes that we've used historically.
Good. Yes. Okay, Maggie, sorry. So what alternatives have you explored, to reduce the reliance on the tariffs?
Yeah, thank you. I think on our end, I know the high-up kind of project team, this is something that they're really focused on. And I think as FMs, we're really going into our projects that we have submitted and kind of deep diving into those and, prioritizing as well. Like Mark was saying, chillers, boilers, all those things we submit, we really need. But I think kind of prioritizing our projects and understanding, what is needed today versus tomorrow can kind of change. So I think that's a big one, and really just working with our sourcing team and, our local suppliers just to ensure that we're kind of keeping on top of them and understanding exactly where they're purchasing from. So, yeah.
Good feedback on the three of you. So I have another question here for the panel. Now, I'm using the poll as our foundation here with regards to how our participants are saying how ready they are to deal with the tariffs. So the question is, with regards to the three of you, it sounds like you started thinking about, leveraging some longer term thoughts or ideas with regards to partnerships. Have they been solidified? And I think that's key for the participants in the room today, because if we or some of us are sitting on the border and waiting for a decision, yay, nay, are you sitting on that picket fence? Or are you doing something today? Mark? Oh, you're muted, my friend.
There we go. We haven't solidified, I'd say. I think we're still exploring alternatives, and things have been so fluid that it's been, you know, especially for maybe not so much in the last week, but in the weeks prior, things were changing daily. And you know, you're kind of investigating your options and trying to keep as many irons in the fire as you can, but we haven't really made a lot of firm commitments for changing our supply chain. We've really just been trying to figure out what our alternative, or our plan B, C, D, and E will be in the event of, right?
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. Jason. So have you made any like permanent long-term commitments or changes with your suppliers?
So I'm going to say no. And the reason I answer like that is because, you know, to Mark's point, it is very fluid. The one thing I will say is that it's given a resurgence to being able to look at things like total cost of ownership with the executive. You know, oftentimes we all know that the budget can be a very important aspect of every project or every large investment. And at times, depending upon who is on different committees, it determines how important that is in making the decision on purchasing. Whereas, you know, with the tariffs, it kind of gives us an opportunity to start looking at things like total cost of ownership again. You know, much like Mark had said, you know, we're able to look at things we looked at before that may have been a little bit more expensive. However, they may make more sense now. And so this is, again, I guess, an opportunity. So I'm using the tariffs as an opportunity to kind of reintroduce this with my senior leadership, so that, you know, as we're going through the pricing for these different projects, you know, I can hopefully provide more sustainable solutions.
Okay. No, I love that. Thank you, Jason. Maggie.
Yes, I'd have to.
Commitment, right?
I'd have to say no firm decisions as well. You know, like, you know, the other said, things are kind of all up in the air. And when it comes to, you know, our docks and our doors and our HVAC units, I mean, we're going into the warm season right now, right? So kind of getting those all started up. And some things are emergencies, right? Like you need to get things moving and get, you know, our lifts and stuff fixed ASAP. So that's tough sometimes to kind of plan ahead, especially when it is emergency. So nothing kind of firmed up on that type of thing, but I think it's great that we are having these open conversations like this, but also with our client, and having them understand that, you know, we are looking at this and we are planning ahead. We're looking at our budgets. So I think that's kind of been firm of our approach to it. So yeah.
Yes, thank you. So, you know, key message for everyone that's on the social level is that even though there's no decisive answers out there, we still need to be proactive. And we need to think about how it's going to impact on our operations. So the next question is a money question now. Now, how's Jason and Maggie and Mark kind of dealing with balancing cost-saving initiatives when we don't know what the impact of the tariffs are going to be? So again, we'd love to hear your strategies that you can share with the participants today. Let's start with Maggie.
Sorry, can you repeat that one?
Just curious in regards to what strategies you were thinking of with regards to balancing, coming up with cost-saving initiatives, you know, making sure you're dealing with, you know, no too many bumps, you know, with regards to the tariff increases.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, yeah, like I said before, I think focusing on, the relationships we have with our supplier, I think that's a huge one, is having that cost initiative on having those supplies stocked within Canada. I think that's a big thing. I think communicating with our vendors too, ensuring that we have these cost effective things, but also the quality of work that can kind of go hand in hand too. So just ensuring that we're, communicating when it comes to preventive maintenance and things like that. We're communicating the scope of work and things like that, and ensuring that, if we do have those deficiencies and things that need to be taken care of, we're getting quotes. Sometimes our vendors, go out and just fix something, but because we're looking at these tariffs and cost savings and communicating with our client, we know we need those vendors to communicate to us. So we do need quotes. We're going out to more vendors and getting more quotes rather than just having, our preferred vendors quote. That's a good opportunity to cost save as well.
Great. Okay. What about Mark? How are you ascertaining from your products and making sure that there's too many bumps because of the tariff increases, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one innovation or it's not really innovation, it's just changing strategy a little bit, is for some of our projects, we were really looking at doing full asset replacement. And now we've looked at doing rebuilds to bring things to new condition. So a good example is we have a university where we're looking at replacing up to 50 air handlers. And we've gone back and re-looked at those 50 air handlers and seen which ones we can maybe change the motor, the coils, the fan, and all the components, and do more of a rebuild in place, purchasing components locally versus sourcing a full packaged air handler that would ultimately end up coming likely from the US or overseas. So I think that this generally does apply to most of us, where we could look at, instead of doing all new, look at doing refurbs and changing out key components to get you to something that's in like new condition.
Good. Really nice strategy, Mark. Thanks for sharing that with us. Oh, did I ask all three of you? I think I did. Okay.
Nope.
Sorry about that. No.
But that's okay though, Marcia.
No.
You don't have to ask me if you don't wish to.
This is a money question, Jason. It's up your alley, so I have to.
Yeah. So we're doing similar things. In addition to looking at changing of scope, we're also looking at reprioritizing upcoming projects. So, again, we may have, hypothetically, of course, a generator, a mammography machine, and an x-ray machine, all of which are end of life, all of which need to be replaced, and we can't afford to replace all of them. So, the impact of these tariffs, we need to take a look and see that may influence which one we can do. Because, if you're talking about equipment of that size, call it $1 million just to be lazy with math. If you're imposing a tariff on $1 million, that's very significant. That's a very significant budget impact. Whereas if one of the other pieces of equipment, say for example, is delivered from Germany, where there isn't a tariff on that, that's something I think that is worth looking at. Because again, with the tariff situation, we know what we're dealing with today. We don't know what we're going to be dealing with at 4 p.m. this afternoon. Right? I mean, if anything, it's shown us it's exceptionally fluid. So reprioritize, because we know we can do that. And then we can come back later and address one of the other items. The other thing I'll just mention is that as it pertains to the costs, I think it is still important that we all fall back on what are the values of our company or corporation or organization are, and look at those values, look at the mission, look at what we're trying to achieve, as we're evaluating these projects and as we're evaluating things, because we know prices are escalating and we know that we're not going to be able to do as much. We're going to have less to do stuff with. So, taking more time to evaluate what we're going to do with what we have, I think is extremely important. So, but of course, we all have excellent senior leadership, and I know that they're all on board to help with that. So, thank you.
Well, Jason, a beautiful segue to my next question. And it's all about leadership, right? Because some leadership teams today are on so waiting for a decision to be made. So what's the team's recommendation in how to best communicate the impact of the tariffs onto the leadership team or the executive team? Like we're talking about don't wait, but we need to be proactive. So I'd love to hear your advice to the participants with regards to how do you relate what's happening related to the U.S. tariffs on our industry and maintaining the built environment? Okay, that's a loaded question, Jason. So there you go.
Sure. So if I'm speaking with the C-suite, if I'm speaking with senior leadership, I'm going to start with likely magnitude to determine what I'm going to talk about first. So magnitude meaning budget again. And so again, I'm going to look at opportunities to reintroduce total cost of ownership as one of the key ways that we can make decisions. I'm going to ensure that I'm referring to our values, for sure, referring to our mission statement, referring to our strategic plan as we're delivering these items. Because again, while we have less money, we don't have less money. While we are able to acquire less work or goods or services because of the increased cost, I think it's not that we're going to necessarily change the way in which we're doing business. However, meaning at the facility itself. However, we need to be able to help them understand how we can benefit them, right? So it's about explaining things like the total cost of ownership. It's about leveraging organizations like GPOs, where when you're a very small organization with very limited human resources, completing complex RFPs or complex RFQs for services like, say, for example, elevator maintenance. If I can leverage a GPO to do all of that work to execute that request for quotation or request for proposal for me, then, as well as the benefits on the contracts themselves, because again, they have standardized contracts, they have teams of lawyers, they're going to be looking at things like, tariff protection, price escalation clauses, things like that, which all of us certainly can. However, again, it becomes very difficult to be able to set aside the time to do that for each and every contract when you're doing each and every other thing that you have to do in your job. So that's some of how I would communicate to them.
That's your advice. Oh, great advice. Maggie, I'm going to throw it over to you, and then we'll throw it over to Mark. I'd be curious what his recommendations are to the participants in talking to their bosses. Maggie.
Yes, that's always a tough conversation. Lucky for me, our main focus this year is cost savings. So that kind of goes hand in hand. So that works well. But I think, yeah, with us, the main focus is the budget expectations and kind of reevaluating what kind of projects we had put in place. And instead of kind of coming at them with a problem, like Jason said, what type of solutions are we going to put in place, and bringing them solutions rather than a problem. I think that's always the best bet when you're coming to, high up, or the leadership is, coming with some actual solutions for them. And you know, when looking at ours, hard services are our main focus. So what can we do cost saving wise when it comes to soft services? And I think, yeah, soft services, and then as well as budget expectations and bringing those solutions to leadership.
Great advice. Okay, Mark, what kind of advice do you give to these participants in communicating the tariffs?
Great question. I remember back when I was an intern back in the mid-90s, I was an assistant FM for the summer as an engineering student. And I kept going to my boss, who was the director of facility management at the time, you know, oh, I found a problem. I found a problem. And he kept challenging me. He said, is it a problem or is it an opportunity? And I think that really reframed my thinking at a young age. And I was fortunate to have someone who thought that way too. So that's something that I bring up a lot throughout my career, is trying to view things as see the opportunity there. And I think that what we've talked about a lot today is, you know, Jason and Maggie trying to look at opportunities hidden, like the silver lining here within this issue. There's a lot of volatility and things are very fluid right now, but I appreciate that from my team too. If they can come to me and say, listen, you know, we've got, you know, potentially 20% tariffs on this piece of equipment, but, you know, I've looked into this, and this, and I've been able to negotiate this kind of terms with this supplier. If we go here, we pay 5% more, but we might get it twice as fast. And, you know, start to provide me with mitigation options and strategies, and to try and see how we might be able to pivot and bring some innovation and some value to our clients despite a challenging environment. So, you know, it's not all doom and gloom. I think there's a lot of potential opportunities here. I think for those that are providing goods and services in Ontario and in Canada, you know, might be an opportunity here to really rev up the business development teams and to start to see how they might be able to penetrate new markets and increase sales. I think that, you know, there's certainly some challenges. And I think that for us in particular, I know that there's a few particular areas where we won't have a lot of choice. We're going to have to absorb some tariffs. But I think there's other areas where we can balance that. So overall, if my team are coming to me with issues, you know, I'd like to sort of see the bigger picture, make sure they're exploring all the options and doing what they can to provide some mitigation strategies. I think that's the number one thing.
Good. Yeah, I love that kind of strategy, looking at opportunities and being innovative, being creative, yeah, at the same time, rather than doom and gloom, right? So one last question for the panel. It's been very fruitful discussion from the three of you. It's been fantastic. But do you have any kind of final comments to share with the participants about, as the tariffs continue to change? Okay, as I said, there's off again, off and on again, off again, and on again. And Jason said something could materialize at 4 p.m. this afternoon. So, what is your advice, you know, to the participants in the room today? You know, what kind of strategies would you recommend? What would you recommend to do? Just sit there and wait, or sit on their hands and wait? What would you recommend, Jason?
So a few things. First of all, don't wait. We don't know what's going to happen. However, you know, we don't want to wait and let things just happen to us, right? Makes sense. Yes, they can be a little bit of work up front. You know, again, doing the analysis for total cost of ownership can be a little work up front. You know, reaching out to a GPO or even to other organizations in your industry, you know, can be a little bit of work up front, but it may save you in the long run as far as work goes, as well as money. And being able to start looking at and putting in smart purchasing plans, because to a large extent, a lot of this, yes, we're reacting to tariffs, but the way that we're reacting to it is no different than really what we should be doing anyways, right? We should be looking at total cost of ownership. We should be looking to source locally. You know, we should be looking at all of these things as part of our sustainable business plan. So I say, don't wait, start taking action, start having conversations. Even little pieces, right? I mean, you don't have to start running by running a marathon tonight. Go for a walk around the block to start. So just make some action. The other thing I will say, and Mark, Maggie, I apologize if I'm taking some of your guys' thunder too. The other thing I will say is talk to your finance team, talk to your purchasing team. What are they doing? What can you do to help them? Right? If you ask them that, they're going to be so much more open and so much more willing to share information and how they're working on it. So go and approach them, ask them how you can help them as it relates to the tariffs. And I think you're going to find through that collaboration, you'll also be able to find success.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Great advice. Maggie, any final thoughts for our participants this afternoon?
Well, Jason took my answer. I'm just kidding. No, I was thinking when Mark said pivot, that was like the main word when I was working at my old account during COVID, right? It was like pivot. So I think that's a thing too, is being able to pivot, each day is different. I think one thing too, like Jason was saying, speaking to your departments within the company, but I'm also finding that having those candid conversations with, friends and family members, I have brothers in the steel business. I have a brother in finance. So having those conversations, you really do learn a lot and how, they're being impacted and how I'm being impacted. I just think having that overall, conversation really just helps understand exactly what everyone's struggles are. And I think also just, every single day getting on there, understanding what's happening today, because the client might ask you, right? Like, it's just nice to have that knowledge if they do ask you and they do have those questions. So
great. No, great advice, Maggie. Okay, Mark, any kind of final comments for the participants today?
Well, I definitely learned a lot from Jason and Maggie, so thank you for your insights. I think that the last thing I would offer is that, everybody's in this. It is like COVID, we're all in this together. We're on different sides of the table a lot. So as you're stressing about prices going up and placing orders on equipment or your costs, that supplier is also stressed out because they're watching all their orders get canceled. So I think this is a time to sit and talk to each other and to see how you can come to something that's mutually beneficial. I think that willing to sit down and have those hard conversations and see where you can find some middle ground. So I think in this case, don't take it at face value. There's definitely two sides to this coin. And I think it needs a lot of communication and collaboration.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Maggie and Jason and Mark. Very insightful discussion, really key words and strategies you shared with us. It's sharing information and best practices with regards to how to combat the tariffs. So thank you very much. Now, I know we're pretty close to running very close to the end of our hour, but and is there any specific questions we should answer that it might be in the chat room or the Q&A?
Yeah, we've got two questions, which I'm going to mention right now. We've got, has any of the tariff experience influenced your attention to emergency planning and resiliency?
Oh, wow, that's a great question.
We've got one that says, what's the effect of the change on government awarded contracts? And then I'm going to pop them in the chat right now, Marcia. And I know that we're in a webinar with folks, but I just got a phone call that my kid fell in the park. So I am going. Okay. I'll pop the questions up in the chat. If you can moderate it, I'd really appreciate that.
Sure. I'd be happy to do that. I love the question about emergency. Okay. And I'd be curious with regards to your responses, Jason, Maggie, and Mark, with regards to what advice or what have you been doing? And that's an excellent question. We can't predict the unexpected, but again, because of products and services that could be jacked up because of the tariffs, what are you doing about it? Jason, when do you want to start? Jason?
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry, I
muted.
was just rereading the question.
I just
So
paraphrased it.
yeah, so as far as my emergency planning within the hospital, I can't say I've included tariffs within that. However, it clearly is something that I will need to be taking a look at.
Sharing
You
of
know,
information today, Jason. Yeah.
it also leads me to think about the need to speak with our insurance company as well. Because I know that that's going to influence a number of things as well with the insurance.
Mhm. So I'm just going to ask either Maggie or Mark, just because of time. So any volunteers? Maggie or Mark? That's okay. Let me pick on Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, this hasn't really affected us in terms of resiliency or emergency planning. Due to the nature of our operations, it's really been all about procurement and pivoting to maintain cost and service continuity.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Kathleen said a good point about insurance. I agree with you 100%. Now that we think about it and pause for a second, an opportunity exchange is a really, really great question. And then the other question is, what's the effect of the change on government awarded contracts?
So I can speak from a Ontario perspective, at least.
Okay.
I can't actually, I'm not speaking obviously on behalf of the government or anything. My experience as a guy who works at a hospital, which is, you know, overseen by the government of Ontario. So what I've noticed is that the government awarded contracts are still all in play. So if we have an active contract, it's being honored. It's only new contracts or new procurements that are not currently in place that fall under the new requirement. And so again, that requirement is not US. So it's not specifically Canadian. It is definitely, you know, obviously we favor Canadian, but it's not US and Canada is defined as 250 or more employees. And so that's been our experience. So we do have a little bit of runway with a number of things. Some of our major medical device contracts are, you know, a few years in length. And so, you know, we do have some that are coming due next year. And so if in fact, you know, because we don't know what's going to happen if the tariffs continue, you know,
Yes.
that's going to be a fairly major shift because at this point, we don't know what's available elsewhere in the world. Currently in Canada, all of the competitors are US. But that doesn't mean there aren't things elsewhere. And so that's where we're going to be leveraging the GPO to get ready for when that occurs, because we will be looking for non-US.
Okay. So thank you, Jason. Actually, Mark and Maggie, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts about the government contracts, but I think what I'd like to do is kind of officially wrap up our webinar this afternoon. So thank you again, Jason and Mark and Maggie, for your insights and best practices. I want to thank the participants that are in today's webinar. Our goal is to share information and exchange best practices as it relates to how the tariffs are impacting on us in our industry. We're planning to do additional webinars going forward just to help all of us in the room with regards to combating the tariffs. So thank you everyone that joined us today. And thank you again very much, Mark and Jason and Maggie, and I'll be in touch, trust me. And we'll keep in touch for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Appreciate
everyone.
it.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thank
Bye.
you.